Good afternoon and welcome to the Athens Planning Commission meeting. It is September 7th at 12 p.m. Looking up and down the dais, I see that we do have a quorum with all members present. And we don't have anybody here in the council chambers today for the public hearing on the University Estates Planned Unit Development, PUD, Homestead Court, and Broadmoor. But it is a public hearing so that we meet the guidelines for discussing the PUD that someday will be up there on Homestead Court. Would any commissioners want to speak to this before we jump into our regular meeting? There's no public, so. Okay.
I think it's, Mayor, I think it's a good thing that we are using TIF money to build this, aren't we?
We would be.
Would be if it gets built, is that if and when?
Well, once we get to that point, then yes, then we will have the TIF go into effect and use that for the infrastructure, at least to use that for the developer having developed that infrastructure to our speculations, to our specs, and then.
So that's a plus. I mean, council started it, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah,
It's already approved.
Yeah, it was approved
So,
a couple of years ago.
good. I mean, they accomplished
So
something.
after this meeting, when would be the first reading with city council? Does anybody know?
Yes, I just said
However
it was
long it takes to
already
get on the
approved.
agenda or whatever, I mean,
We approved it.
Oh, you approved it.
Not the council.
we don't.
I get into the specifics on
Well, let's, let's hold your question, we'll just jump into the regular meeting.
Okay.
Come out of,
That's fine.
of the public hearing on
Okay.
this. Okay. Did you want to speak to the public hearing itself? Okay. We do have one person who just showed up, Mr. Rob Delac. All right, then I'm going to call the public hearing closed and go straight into the regular meeting, again establishing the quorum. We do have a quorum. Disposition of the minutes from August 3rd of 2023. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to read through those minutes.
I thought they were very well done, and so I will move that we accept the August 3rd minutes as presented.
Second.
Have a first and a second. Any discussion, edits, omissions? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Those minutes are adopted. Cases. Now we can
Okay.
have a conversation about case number 23-02, University Estates PUD/Homestead Court and Broadmoor Affordable Housing Development. Director Stone, do you want to?
Yes, sir.
Jump in.
I'm kind of stepping in for Director Riggs since he is sick today. But the reason that we had this meeting and it has come back before Planning Commission is because we didn't definitively say that the previous exercise of the communication and then subsequently the case was a public hearing, and a public hearing was necessary in order for a PUD and a subdivision to go before City Council, and so that now is being done. We technically already approved this case. If you know, in the minutes we just approved. We noted in those minutes that the last time we met we approve this case. So I don't know, sir, that we need to do another step to approve this case. We can, if we need to. If anyone has any further discussion on it, just to kind of have a belt and suspenders approach. But the other thing that I wanted to share with commission members is since this case came before the commission, the developers have come to the city and indicated that it is no longer financially viable to build this project, even with the arrangement that the city struck with them to utilize a TIF mechanism, tax incremental financing, to help offset the cost of infrastructure. Basically, the plans that we approved the estimate on the infrastructure construction for this site came back more than double what the contractors were expecting to be able to make, make the numbers pencil out to make it a viable. And they're not, making a ton of money on this. And the fact that the infrastructure costs are estimated to be so high makes it just non-viable for them. Additionally, the financing that they were seeking to build it has a much higher interest rate today than, say, it did a couple years ago when we started. A lot of that is a function of the wider economic winds associated with raising interest rates in an attempt to kind of cool off the economy. And so the financing that they had has this higher interest rate, and it's basically going to make it such that even with the TIF revenue at the end of the project that would start coming in future years to help service the debt associated with the infrastructure, the interest would actually cost more than they would. They wouldn't be able to pay down the debt because the interest costs associated with today's financing. And so, this is something that as a city, I think, we want to have happen because we have a shortage of housing in the city, especially housing where people can build equity, and actually buy a place and then build equity. We just don't have enough, and this is a, while it's not a perfect development, it's a pretty good one. That would happen, and so I think this is something that as a city we want. But right now, with a mechanism that we put in place with the TIF in order to get this across the finish line, it's just not financially viable. So the mayor and I are going to look at are there other ways that this could be done? But that's not for this body to sort out. Obviously, that's a council decision. But that's the situation related to this. It's very, very hard to build housing and make it go in today's economy with both construction costs as high as they are and interest rates as high as they are.
So what's the next step? We've already passed it, right?
Right. So I would like to, and I asked that we had this public hearing so that if in the future there, interest rates come down, there's another source of funding to offset capital costs that they're able to find. Maybe we can find some state or federal money that can help offset some of those capital costs. That this body has already approved it, and then it can just move forward to city council without having to go back through planning commission.
Well, let me share, and I would like to hear from the other commissioners on this particular topic. As Commissioner Stone has mentioned this, this is extremely disappointing to me. We are very cognizant of the fact that we are lacking in affordable housing here in the city of Athens. We're lacking in housing, period, in the city of Athens. Before I open this up for further discussion, I do want to say that I believe that we should go ahead and vote on this case and move it forward. That way things are in place. In the fortunate event that the developers were, or for my administration, were to find a path forward for helping with the infrastructure portion of this particular project, but to kind of put an exclamation point on what Commissioner Stone was saying, as we understand the financial changes for this development, given the current environment, both from the interest rates, materials costs, things of that nature, to where, and then again the engineer's estimated cost of the infrastructure doubling, almost tripling what they were anticipating. The other issue was, that there was a potential low-income housing tax credit project that could have been, deployed somewhere in the city of Athens. Again, a housing project that would fill a need. And it just seems like, that there's so many gaps out there, financial gaps that were unanticipated. I believe that there could be a path forward. It's just trying to find out what that best path is as we, as a community, see how we can potentially have different incentives that we're able to use to help get housing development projects across the finish line. But again, just to be on the record as saying that it's disappointing. There is also a level of frustration that we are, it seems, challenged at so many different turns with having affordable housing here in the city of Athens. So let me open it up to any other of the commission members, if you care to speak on this particular case.
Well, I'm supportive of going ahead and voting on it and approving it today and setting it in place. I fear that if we do that, there's probably a high probability that the way the project would develop out in the future, if it were able to move forward, may be different than what we're approving, and they may have to come back anyway. But that said, I still think it's probably a good idea to approve it, and hopefully, it can go forward and it will look pretty much the same and will not require going through all the steps again. But anyway, yeah.
Do you want a second?
I guess unless any other communication on this.
I agree, it'd be a great project. My only ask would be that, and I know, Director Stone, you've been working on this, is just like a traffic light or something to address all the traffic that would come from this and the new apartments at the bottom of the hill. And I know that's in the works, but I think that'd be awesome to have that done ahead of this, if that ends up working out that way.
And you're speaking to 682.
Yes, I'm sorry, 682, yep, at the base of the neighborhood. But, yeah, no, I approve it for sure. I just wanted to add in that I think, I live in that neighborhood, and I think traffic on 682 is the biggest, was the biggest concern of this project, and I think that's all it was just traffic. So.
To that point, houses don't generate huge amounts of traffic. McDonald's generate huge amounts of traffic. Theaters generate huge amounts of traffic. Now, will there be more? Yeah, there'll be more. There'll be more people, obviously, that live in this area. But it's not like a business that turns visitors. And so as we looked at it, looked at what University Estates Boulevard can hold. Now, if you want to go all the way back, University Estates, all 4 phases intended to have multiple access points into that development, and with phase 3 and phase 4 basically halted for the foreseeable future. That's where those access points to another way to get in would come from. Development of this phase, and certainly the city doesn't have the resources to go and build a road just to be able to access the back side of the facility. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing, right? Like we need phase 3 or phase 4 to develop in order for us to get a back access to University Estates or any of these kind of peripheral developments in the city. But at the same time, one of the barriers to developing phase 3 and phase 4 is the opposition to more traffic associated with phase 3 and phase 4. But you need them to build in order to get that access road in the back. So which development is the one that triggers the building of that access road? Certainly it's not Homestead Court, but maybe sometime in the future, phase 3 or phase 4 could allow for a road to go all the way out to 682, so you don't have all traffic at 682 and University Estates Boulevard.
Thank you.
Yeah. I would only say that I think probably, I understand the state is looking at a roundabout at 56 and 682. As well as not in this location, not where University Estates discharges, but near there. So I think that'll help. But I also I feel like there also needs to be slow down lanes. There needs to be more than just really 2 lanes through that area as well. In addition to maybe a traffic light. The engineers need to look at that, I think. But I just think to be able to turn into University Estates, it would be nice to have a lane where you can slow down to make that right-hand turn. And when you're coming out, maybe a center lane or something. I don't know. Anyway, I just think that whole intersection needs to be looked at. I don't know that it's entirely a traffic signal issue, but it may be some other pieces to it. In addition, anyway.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve case number 23-02?
So moved.
There is a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. Communications, we don't have any. Reports, Commissioner Stone, do you have anything else to report out for Director Riggs, who's not with us today?
The only other note from that is he is looking at several changes to code, both on the zoning side and on the subdivision regulations, that may help the city in the future for emerging, emerging things in city government, state government, things related to housing and trends. We already talked about our shortage of housing and how hard it is to build houses. There are places around the country where tiny houses are getting built pretty regularly for things. Right now, our code doesn't really make it's kind of hard to do and make those work. And if that's something we want to have, we need to have some changes to our zoning code or subdivision regulations. We probably need to talk about what is particular types of buildings, and what I'm getting at is the Connex houses or the shipping container houses where you take shipping containers, you convert them to houses. Do we want those in the city at all? If we do, what zones, what configuration, would they have to be modified to a certain extent as opposed to just popping down a Connex box and having people live in it? I don't think we want that, but I do think we want to be open to the ideas of alternatives in construction. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to have problems like this, which is you can't build any housing because it's too expensive. He's talked about barn dominiums. That's a very common thing that's happening in places where pool barns basically are being converted into housing. And so I think that these are all things that as a city, we need to have code that address and, say how it can be well done and how it shouldn't be done. And this planning commission will be the first entity to need to approve before it goes to city council. So David, my task to him is to work on some of these things over the next few months and then bring forward to this body. An example of subdivision regulations. Right now, our subdivision regulations say single-family home lots need to be 8,000 square feet. And if you look at the center part of the city, and there's not a lot in the center part of the city that's 8,000 square feet. Most of them are about 4,500 square feet if you look at your traditional city lots. But for whatever reason, we've got subdivision regulations that say a new R1 subdivision needs to have 8,000 square foot lots. It's gigantic, for really what the modern need is. And so that's something that I think needs to change among other things in our code.
Yeah, I think that I agree with that. I think that it's important to build where the infrastructure already is when we can, to keep things more compact. But I think if you've got to have that big a lot or other things that are probably there in the code that prohibit it from really happening, I think we need to look at those. I agree.
Very good. Any other comments on that?
I have a related, about 2 months ago or so, we were presented with a drawing and information about the Stimson corridor. And I just wonder if there's anything new with regard to that. I think there was some discussion at the time that this may roll into zoning changes. Is there any update on that?
You can certainly.
Sure. Thank you for the question. So, American Structure Point is the planning firm that we've been using to look at that. They're the ones who generated those drawings that we shared. Their task is basically by the end of October to provide a series of recommendations out of the study of the Stimson Avenue corridor. And I think one of those recommendations is going to be not necessarily specific parcel zoning changes, although there may be, but more an overlay zone that would need to come through Planning Commission to review. And so they're getting close, I think, to providing something that that, you know, we can discuss, and obviously we'll want to do it over a couple meetings, so, I'll reach back out to them and see where they are. My gut feel would be near the end of the month. Maybe if not the next meeting, certainly the first meeting in October, and then we'd have a couple opportunities to talk about it if it's something we want to.
Okay, good, good. I had one more thing. So talking about this housing and the difficulty the developer is having, I also have been aware of, you know, what the university is talking about or the community is talking about with regard to the ridges. Are there things that are different there that will allow that housing? You know, they won't have the same stumbling block, because they were talking about a significant amount of housing at a relatively reasonable rate for, you know, generally for like incoming faculty and staff, younger families or whatever. And so is there something different there, or are they going to end up with the same issues that this present developer is dealing with up here at University of States?
Yeah, I mean, with the Ridges project, which, as I understand it, of the 700 acres up there, 700?
750.
750 acres up there, approximately 100, and that would be the Kirkbride campus, basically the, you know, the Ridges buildings, and other properties on Dairy Lane. They all fall under the new community authority, and with the new community authority, things are, I don't want to say they're easier, but it affords a lot different opportunities for developers to come in and develop new or redevelop the Ridges into what could be up to 700 units, housing units. Now, that's everything from a small condo to a freestanding duplex or some form of housing that would be a newer build on the site, or repurposing some of the former cottages that are on the backside of the Ridges. But there's levers that can be pulled within the new community authority that are much different than what the university/state can do versus what the city can do. There will be some zoning changes up there with the 100 acres that'll have to be addressed, but that'll go through city council.
I think additionally, you know, I mean, right now, the city is putting in a brand new 12-inch water main on Dairy Lane, as well as a new sewer on Dairy Lane, and part of that is to accept the limited amount of sewage that we're gonna accept from the county, that area. So those two infrastructure costs would not be included for anything built along Dairy Lane. Certainly, there's already infrastructure in the ground up on the Kirkbride campus that could support the redevelopment, and then we're building the fairly large trunk line across the southern land, the land south of Dairy Lane, that then would be in place that a developer wouldn't have to build. So those are costs that would be avoided, and then land costs. You know, I mean, that's the other benefit of the new community authority. You're not paying to buy that raw land on the front end, and you know, so subsequently that savings is to be had, and hopefully you could extend on to a prospective buyer of a house, townhouse or whatever.
That's good.
Well, and to add to the infrastructure, I mean, the city, to show that how important this housing project is to us as well, you know, to our community, is there is roughly 19 acres of, you know, city lands that are up there that have been agreed upon to where it can be part of this development moving forward. So it's a.
Well, I just think, I think this community needs more varied housing, you know, I think there's at all levels, there's a lack of housing in this community, and it seems as though things aren't, you know, the university seems like their enrollment is pretty good, things are growing a bit, and I just think I'm glad to hear that maybe there are other methods in place, other ways that things can go that will allow some of this, and you know, I really worry that sometimes the city can be, people can feel that the city is not a community where development is very easy or where it's embraced. And I want to try to, you know, and I know your administration has been working hard to try to make things better for developers dollars, and for good development projects. And so I appreciate that, but I'm glad to hear that what's going on with potentially the Ridges development, the portions that will be developed, may not fall into the same, may not stumble the same way or something here. Rising costs and all of that. I know that's all a factor. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. You absolutely can. Just state your name, your address, and if you're representing anyone.
I'm not representing anyone other than myself. I live here in Athens on Morris Avenue. So I agree with this discussion is great and would like to see ways to enhance our housing stock in the city. One thing I haven't heard mentioned is accessory dwelling units and allowing those. So there would be some opposition to that clearly in R1 neighborhoods. That's just going to happen. But I think that freezing R1 neighborhoods in time to never change is absolutely the wrong approach. And that's what the people who don't want change in those neighborhoods, that's what they want. They want it to always stay the same. But we need higher density. We need some infill. And accessory dwelling units is one of those things that could be allowed if you have tiny homes, for example. Modular buildings could be brought in at low cost to create additional housing where it makes sense. But again, if we're infilling, our regulations currently are built for those large lots you were talking about, Commissioner Stone. And infilling in the Near East Side neighborhood, for example, you have setbacks you can't meet. And so there's variances every single time somebody wants to build something. And that's a painful process to have to go through. So loosening those regulations, I think, is key, but also I would like to see considerations about other ways we could leverage and infill in R1 zones in the city, which would be critical to us, I think, increasing our housing stock and adding options for people. So just want to make sure we're looking at the full spectrum of possibilities, I think, is the key. And if you look across the country, you've probably been hearing stories about whole cities and whole states even adopting changes to R1 zoning to loosen those restrictions. It's really key to helping address our housing issues. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. I will qualify that under opportunity for citizens to speak on anything, even though it says not covered by the agenda, unless, Mr. Dulac, if you have anything that's not on the agenda that you'd like to speak to. Okay. Announcements and other business. Our next meeting will be September 21st at noon, 12 o'clock p.m. here in council chambers. That said, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
I have a second.
Second.
All right. This meeting is adjourned.